Well, the offseason is in full swing for Zags basketball, and quite a bit of news that's come out. But I'll tell you what, we do have some exciting things on the horizon for the show.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Obviously, happy to be doing another weekly video for you guys during the offseason here. And if you haven't already, make sure to like the channel, like the video, subscribe to the channel. And we don't always say this, but turn on your notifications.
You're going to want to.
You're definitely going to want to. You mentioned some big things on the horizon. We've actually got some guests lined up for the show. And tell you what, you're not going to want to miss them. So be sure to like, subscribe, turn on those notifications. We're not going to be stopping through the offseason here. And I got a fun one today to talk about as well.
And like you said, we'll be doing these weekly installments. If we do get any major Gonzaga news, of course, we'll be bringing it to you sooner.
Of course.
Always make sure you follow us on Twitter and on social medias. That's always going to be the quickest way to get your Gonzaga news. And a pretty fun thing on Twitter right now. If you get a chance, go on there. We've got you got $15 to choose a team, choose yours. So if you had a chance to do that yet, make sure you hop on Twitter, Upper Left Sports, and take a look at that. What we want to do today, though, is very fun. We're probably going to be doing this a few times, I would think, between now and when the ball tips off for the Zags upcoming season, and that's previewing this 2021-2022 Gonzaga roster. Obviously, a lot of things can change. We do know a little bit more now, and so we're going to preview some things that we know, some things that we're expecting, and give you a little bit of insight of where we could still see this roster change before craziness in the kennel.
Yeah.
And the place that I want to start this with is the guy that I think is going to have to steer the ship this year, and that's Andrew Nemhart. This is a guy who played great last year for the Zags. We did see him, for his standards, struggle a little bit in that national championship game, but all indications would be that he's going to be running the show this year for Mark Few's Gonzaga Bulldog squad.
Yeah, he's getting the keys to this team. I think that's kind of a foregone conclusion right now. I mean, this is a 3-year starter who's started just about every game in his college career. I think there was only a handful this year that he did not start for Gonzaga. But he's just a very calm presence up top that brings you a ball handler, a guy who can facilitate to his other players out there, and just a guy as well that can really attack that mid-range, and we really saw him excel with that mid-range game in the pick-and-roll game.
Mid-range maestro.
Mid-range maestro. I said it a few times, and I will live by that. His ability to get to that elbow and make the right decision, whether it's a pull-up, whether it's finding the roll man, or even a kick out back to a shooter, he does such a good job of that, and it really puts a lot of pressure on defenses. So, I mean, this is a guy I really look for him to take a big jump this year, knowing that he's going to be starting. That was something that this season, he was practicing as a redshirt player until obviously just days before the season started. So This is a different offseason for him, knowing that he'll be the starting point guard. I think it'll have a huge, boost to his development this season. And if he can add a little bit, improve that three-point shooting a little bit as well. And obviously I think he knows just tighten up that handle just a little bit against those elite defenders that he's going to see. He's in line for a big jump.
I'm a huge Andrew Nemhart fan. I mean, I think he got overshadowed, rightfully so, by Jalen Suggs last year.
Yeah.
I equate it to like quarterbacks in the NFL. You hear about, like last year, these quarterbacks not getting a full off season. Andrew Nemhart did not expect to be playing for the Gonzaga Bulldogs last year. Got that waiver, was made eligible, was a big contributor to this team.
Yeah.
But I do think, like you said, with a full off season, Zag fans don't understand, how lucky we are to have a guy like Andrew Nemhart to come in after Jalen Suggs is moving on to the NBA. So I do think he will improve that three-point shot tremendously. He's just going to be a lot more comfortable in this Gonzaga offense, and I do think he'll be up to the challenge of leading the Zags team next season at the guard spot. The next guy I want to get into is going to be a junior already, and that's Anton Watson. This is a guy who started the season in the starting five last year. As the season went on, did fall out of that starting rotation. But, coaches always said if you've played any level of basketball, they always say it doesn't matter if you start, it matters where you're at the end of the game. And as the season went on and Mark Few's leash, as it always does, gets shorter and shorter, what we saw was that he had a lot of trust in Anton Watson. We saw Anton Watson play not just meaningful minutes in the Final Four run, but we saw him play some very good minutes for this Gonzaga squad.
Yeah, he's just a guy that does every little thing, and you need it on teams, especially like last year. That team is so stacked, and it's going to be the same thing this year. you need a guy who can come in and affect the game in multiple areas, and that's exactly what Watson did. He was a very efficient scorer, taking smart shots around the basket, can affect the game defensively. And again, talking about how important an offseason is to players, this is where really he's in line for a good jump as well. I mean, last offseason, he was still rehabbing from his shoulder and not being able to, finish out his his sophomore season there, and then obviously get through that offseason. This summer, he gets to actually have a full offseason, being healthy, running with the squad. That's going to be big for him, and we've talked about it a lot. I mean, this is a guy that shows so much potential. I mean, if you watched him at Gonzaga Prep in high school, you saw why he was so highly touted.
He was a projected first-round pick. He was expected to leave after hhis first season. People forget that.
Yeah, I mean, and it made sense. If you watched him, I mean, this is a guy, he could shoot it, he could attack, he was very aggressive finishing, and obviously he's put aside some of his own personal, maybe goals in his game to better the team, which is obviously what you want in the Gonzaga program, but I guarantee you right now coaches are in his ear, hounding on him this offseason to be aggressive and really just be himself out there. But this is a guy, Mark Few loves to start experienced players, so I do think, I agree with you, he's in line for a starting position, at least to start the season. And I do think he can surprise a lot of people this year.
I think we're going to see, one of two, if not two, talks happening between Mark Few, this coaching staff, and Anton Watson. And part of that was when Rui came in. We all saw when he was getting minutes at the end of games, like, this guy is special. He's very talented. The only guy in the whole McCarthy Athletic Center who didn't know it was Rui. And, Mark Few and Tommy Lloyd and Brian Michelson and this whole staff had to tell him, like, Rui, like, you're really good. And, I think that's a little bit all these college kids, it's all confidence. And I think
Absolutely.
that Anton will realize that it's, getting to GU was one thing, but he's good enough to be a national player for this Gonzaga team. And I also go to a little bit of what we've learned that Corey Kispert, the talk that Mark Few had with him going into his junior season, that like, hey, we need you to be the leader. We need you to be the guy. And Anton Watson has that in him. I think this Gonzaga team, as we keep talking about it leading up to the season, has an opportunity to have a little bit of nastiness to it. And I think that Anton Watson can kind of be that tone setter,
Absolutely.
The leader of that. We know some of these other guys coming in have that in them as well. And so I do expect him to make a major jump that I think is going to catch a lot of Zeg fans off guard. Going on to our next guy, Drew Timmy. I want to preface this with something that obviously we all expect Drew Timmy to return. All of that being said, I do want to give an update on where he's at and some updates and some timelines that are going to happen. So Drew Timmy is right now preparing and training for the NBA draft process. He's working with a world-renowned trainer so that when he works out in front of teams, he can put on a show and get some feedback. But here's the thing that I want people to understand, that if you're Drew Timmy and you go through this process and the San Antonio Spurs say, hey, Drew, we're sitting there at 22, you're our guy, Drew Timmy will not be coming back to Spokane. I don't think that that's widely regarded as what's going to happen. I'm a huge Drew Timmy fan. I believe that is something that could definitely happen. All of that being said, July 19th is the final day for a player to withdraw their name out of the draft. I would not expect us to have a firm decision from Drew Timmy until that, and rightfully so. He should go through this process, give his stock an opportunity to see where he might go, and at the very least get some good feedback so he can come and play in Spokane for one more year. But tell me, if Drew comes back and is on this roster next season, tell me how you see him fitting in.
I mean, he's a National Player of the Year contender day one.
Maybe the favorite.
Could easily be the favorite. I don't think anybody can really argue that fact. I mean, this is a guy who is going to most likely average over 20 points a game next year. And we saw it. I mean, this is a guy, we pounded this drum during the season. He has the best post footwork in the nation. It's not even going to be a contest next year. I mean, he is extremely skilled down low. And that's just why he's so good. He may not be the most athletic guy on the court, but he's going to outwork you with his IQ down low. And his ability as well, just his ability to bring the ball up the court. He can pass, initiate offense. And his IQ in the pick and roll, we saw that really just excel with Andrew Nemhart and Jalen Suggs last year, and even Yai, I mean, all the guards that Gonzaga had. He's going to be a leader on this team. He brought a lot of the energy to the floor last year, and I fully expect that to continue for him this year. And obviously for him, and we saw it in the national championship as well. I know people were, maybe calling out his defense. We talked about it in our recap. I think it was more of a Baylor game plan to pull him out of situations where he could be successful. But that's definitely going to be a focus for him. And if obviously that NBA feedback says, hey, you need to work on defense a little bit, maybe work on rebounds a little bit. If he can add to that defensive end of the court just a little bit more, it just strengthens that National Player of the Year, man. This is going to be one of, if not the best player on Gonzaga, and one of, if not the best player in the country. And that just goes to show you how deep Gonzaga is this year. I mean, this roster is just absolutely loaded. So Drew Timme will be a leader this year, and he's going to just be incredibly fun to watch.
Yeah, I mean, if you've watched any of the film coming out of Richardson where he's been training, you can see he's been working on a lot of that lateral quickness in the weight room, doing all that. And I look at, I'm a Denver Broncos fan, and so I lived through that absolute bulldozing of that Super Bowl by the Seahawks. And the Broncos took that game, right, and said, we're never going to let that happen again. And they ended up winning a Super Bowl years later. And what they learned is like, hey, we need to have a little bit of nasty. We need to, we can't just have this flashy offense, which little bit of what Gonzaga was last year. And they ran into that Gonzaga Baylor national championship game reminded me so much of that Broncos Seahawks Super Bowl. And they ran into a nasty Baylor team. And so if you're Drew Timme, if you're this Gonzaga team, you look at something like that and say, hey, like, we want to be that. We want to bring that. And just go back and watch Drew Timme's high school film if you get a chance. This is a dude that wants to bring the heat. I think that him and the next guy we're going to talk about are going to definitely bring that to this Gonzaga team as well. And to go back to what we talked about, Anton Watson, I think we're going to keep talking about kind of bringing that nasty, because when you get punched in the mouth like we did in that national championship game, I can promise you that's going to be a point of emphasis with this team. The next guy we're talking about needs no introduction. That is the number 1 overall recruit heading into next season. Obviously the top recruit in Gonzaga history. That is Chet Holmgren, a guy that just finally announced his decision to come to Gonzaga, a complete unicorn. I don't need to tell you how good he is. Just go watch the film. He is a very, very special player. If you enjoyed watching Jalen Suggs, congratulations. You got one of his best friends in the whole world coming from Minnehaha up to Spokane. And he's going to be just a joy to watch. I mean, This is a kid that if you haven't watched him play, he's not just a 7-footer. He's a 7-footer that can handle the rock. Yeah. He can shoot the 3. You can really play him 1 through 5. They're not going to. We're probably going to see him play the 3, 4, and 5 for this Gonzaga team. But quickly give me, like Chet's going to start. We know this. We're going to get into here in a minute that there's going to be a spot up for grabs. And you said, like, Anton's going to start the season. He's going to have to lock that down and play well if he wants to. There's so much talent on this team. He's going to have to play well to keep that spot.
Yeah.
But
I mean, that could even change for craziness, but
I know that freshmen are never entitled to anything. I can promise you that Mark Few and this coaching staff is going to make Chet come in and earn that spot. But let's not make any jokes about it. Like, Chet Holmgren's going to start for this team.
Yeah, that's a given. And like you said, if you haven't watched Chet Holmgren and you've maybe only seen, his ESPN profile or whatever it might be, just remove from your head that he's 7'1". Just take that out of the equation, because you're going to see that.
Just the cherry on top.
And you're going to say, oh, he's our center. He's not a true center. He's not going to play center for Gonzaga. Does he maybe play in spots? Sure. But they're not bringing him in to be a center. You might have laughed when Drew says, you can play him 1 through 5. But again, if you watch his film, he's legitimately capable of doing that. I mean, he burst onto the scene 2 years ago, I think it was, when at a basketball camp with Steph Curry, he crossed up Steph Curry and finished with a dunk, and that's when everybody was kind of like, oh, okay. I mean, of course, don't get me wrong, Steph went down the next trip and just had to give him a little bit of that sauce, just to let him know who he was. But even when you watch his high school tape, I mean, he brought the ball up for his high school team a lot, and that wasn't something that just would happen. I mean, it was something that team was very comfortable with. You saw it in his high school matchup against the 2022 number 1 recruit in the nation, Emoni Bates, where Chet was bringing the ball up, and Emoni Bates, 6'8", is guarding him up the floor. Most 7-footers can bring the ball up, but they don't have that ability to actually, have some handles and cross people up coming up the court. And Chet does that. He's also a guy who is a plus 3-point shooter. He can very well play the wing because he's quick enough to guard offensive players out there. And if you get by him on the perimeter, well, then you've got a guy with a 7'5" wingspan who averaged, I think, about 5 or 6 blocks a game in high school right on your back hip. So, this is a guy who is going to affect the game in every single category. I know I've already said that, but Chet really does it to just the maximum extent that you can. And you talk about bringing the nastiness. YouTube that game against Emoni Bates. There are tons of videos out there about it. You will see how fired up Chet is leading into that game. I think everybody kind of talked about how Emoni Bates was the better player. Of course, Bates has been chalked up to be the best prospect since LeBron for a couple years now. And Chet heard all of that. And when Chet makes a big play, here's what I love about Chet. He's going to let you know about it. Might remind you of his teammate Jalen Suggs, who his first bucket of the season, he got the alley-oop over Marcus Garrett and picked up that technical. And that's just that nastiness you need. That's that momentum swings that really just drive a team. And, can't say enough good words about Chet. Can't be excited enough. This is going to be a player unlike anything you've ever seen in a Gonzaga uniform.
This Sunday on Mother's Day, if you get a chance, they will be playing in the Iverson Classic. We'll get to see him go against Paulo Banchero out of the west side of the state, who's going to Duke. You've got some other Zags in that game. Hunter Salas will be playing that. Potential Zag Nolan Hickman will be in that. So definitely watch that if you can.
Loaded rosters.
One of my favorite tweets from the offseason so far was someone talking about how Jalen Suggs leaves to go to the NBA. Mark Few heads back to Monstar Mountain to go pick up Chet Holmgren, which, I think Chet would agree. It's like his game is just that special. He looks like a dude you took from Monstar Mountain to play against the Looney Tunes. Like, he's just that dude. Total really unicorn, like we said. So in that fifth spot in the starting rotation, you're going to have really a battle. Yeah. There's some guys I want to go over here and who they are. It's Dom Harris, who Dom is a kid that has all the talent in the world, did not get as many minutes as I'm sure he would have liked to last year. We really saw him.
COVID pause early hurt.
Yeah, for sure. And we saw that as the season went on, he got a lot more comfortable. This is a kid that he was known coming out of high school as a elite, being able to get to the basket, finish around the rim, also a plus passer. I think his shooting is super underrated. This is a kid that could be a 35% plus 3-point shooter.
39 last year on low volume.
On high volume, I think he can be there. And so he's going to have an opportunity to start for this Gonzaga team, rightfully so. And he is very, very special. And then Hunter Salas. This is the, I think, second now highest recruit in Gonzaga history. Number 4 in the nation last time I checked. But Hunter Salas, if you enjoyed watching Jalen Suggs play, Hunter Salas is going to come in out of Omaha, Nebraska, and be that freshman point guard. If he doesn't start, which I think a lot of people are expecting him to start on this team, he's going to be playing 18 to 20 minutes a game. Totally different player than Jalen Suggs, but you're going to have a lot of fun watching Hunter Salas. Both of these young guards are going to compete for a starting spot.
Absolutely.
And then a new Zag to the fold through the transfer market is Rasir Bolton. This is a kid who played for Iowa State last year, started his career at Penn State. He had actually a very interesting tale to his tape and to the numbers. Aaron Cook ended up leaving. I think a lot of people expected him to maybe use that extra year of eligibility. He moved on into the transfer portal, so in comes Rasir Bolton. But here's what's really interesting with his college basketball career is at Penn State, at high volume, he shot 36% from 3. He took like 143-point shots his freshman year. Last year at Iowa State, he only shot 31% on about half that volume. And so it reminds me a little bit of baseball, that you see a pitcher, some mechanics are off, and you're like, hey, listen, let's get you in. We can fix you. We can get you right. I think this Gonzaga team sees something in Rasir Bolton that they're like, hey, we can get you back to high volume shooting the 3, which this team's going to need. When you lose, Corey Kispert, you lose Joel Ayayi, you're going to need some 3-point production.
Absolutely.
And so I think that regardless, he's going to have a chance to start. But if he comes off the bench, he could be that sniper potentially. But aside from that, this is a guy, if you watch the film, he's very good at initiating offense. This was an Iowa State team that had a ton of talent and just never put it all together. Chalk it up to coaching, whatever you want, but there was a lot of talent on that team. He was able to initiate that offense for the Cyclones. He's a great finisher at the rim. And then I do believe, just go look at what this coaching staff did with Brandon Clark. You can't tell me you can't get Rasir Bolton's three-point shot right. And so, between Dom, Hunter, Bolton, one of those three you're expecting is going to be in that starting lineup.
We got one more to add in that battle, too. That's Julian Strother.
Yes.
Julian Strother is a guy who really came on at the end of the year. I know us, along with a lot of Zag fans, kind of wish he would have been a little bit more ready to possibly contribute in that championship game.
I think he was ready, yeah.
Yeah, I think he was, and obviously I may just didn't get enough minutes. But we know few just goes to that shorter leash, like you said, and especially in a championship game. You're not resting for another game after that, so it's pretty typical for coaches to do that. But Julian Strother is a guy who brings great size to that guard, small forward position. Really showing, I think, that he can be a plus shooter at the next level, but just an all-around bucket getter. Don't think he's just a sniper. This is a guy who can score at all three levels. He's got a good mid-range. He can attack the basket. And really just showed everything you want out of a guy like that in his freshman season. He showed all the potential in the world. And so to have a four-person battle for that fifth starting spot just shows you that no matter how that position shakes out for the starter, you've already got three other bench players ready to play very solid minutes and contribute to this team. And we're not even done with players who are going to contribute.
And Julian came in actually considered more of a slasher. He's got a well-rounded game when he starts hitting from three like he was, and you're like, oh. We kind of thought that we might see that more out of Dom this year. Dom did end up shooting kind of at the end of the season, but Julian wasn't expected to be the sniper. And so he can slash. He can shoot. He's a kid that I'm, definitely looking at who has a very high chance of getting that last starting spot for sure. If not, he's going to play super meaningful minutes.
Absolutely.
Other guys we want to get to, Kaden Perry coming out of Battleground.
Cannot wait.
I could spend 20 minutes talking about Kaden Perry
Easy.
And the progression that we've seen of Kaden Perry over the last 12 to 18 months. Get ready, Zeg Nation. This kid is special. He's got some nastiness to him for sure. We're both super big on Kaden Perry, and we'll talk.
Finishes everything. I love that about him, man.
We'll talk about him a lot more as we get closer to the season. Ben Gregg, this kid, few loves him. This is a kid that has a step ahead of anyone coming in. He played a half a season of not just Division I basketball, but Division I basketball on a national championship team. And so don't be surprised if Ben Gregg blows a lot of people away, and now he's in this conversation for that starting spot. He's super versatile. I think that's something that Chet has, but I think that having a guy that can play that three also has that length and size. Don't be surprised if Ben Gregg isn't in the conversation to be starting by the time we get there. And we're at 10 deep now. We're at Ben Gregg, Kaden Perry, and we're 9-10 deep.
It's insane.
There's a guy who is now projected to go to Gonzaga. That's Nolan Hickman. He was committed to Kentucky. He's from Seattle. He went to Eastside Catholic. When COVID hit, he ended up going to a school down in Utah that is a closed school, a charter school, Wasatch Academy. That they're a boarding school out of Mount Pleasant, Utah. That he knew he was going to get a national schedule, get to play in some games. So he left, went and did that. And then what happened, he was committed to Kentucky is he got homesick. And he said, gosh, I don't know if I could go do this again. And he decommitted from Kentucky. All indications are that he's going to be headed to Gonzaga. This is a top 30 recruit as well.
Yeah.
And so if he does commit, we're now at, not saying he's the 11th player, but we're at 11 guys now.
Who deserve minutes.
We saw Omar Ballo and Pavel Zakharov head into the transfer portal. The one guy who did stick around was Arlauskas. And this is a guy I think that he can still contribute for this team.
Yeah.
And so these teams, they get 13 scholarships. Arlauskas, and if Hickman commits, we're at 12. So his team could add one more to the fold, whether that be a developmental player or, they could go after a transfer three who can come in and contribute right away. I think it's interesting because I think you can almost be too deep sometimes.
Yeah, they're close.
And so as you're looking at this roster, That's why I said we're going to be doing several of these previews. This is just where things stand right now, what we know. And gosh, to go off of this national championship squad, number one team in the country for most of the season, and to reload like this, I mean, we're months away, but gosh, you got to be excited as a Zags fan.
Yeah, this is going to be a great season. And, so many teams come off a national championship loss like that, and you worry the wheels are going to fall off. That is not the case with Gonzaga. They absolutely reload, come in with a stacked roster again, and just cannot wait, man. It's going to be a long offseason because this is a fun year ahead of us.
Final bit of news to get to real quick is that Gonzaga-UCLA Final Four matchup. That was one of the best games in college basketball history. Does sound like we're working on a rematch in early November between Mick Cronin and Mark Few.
There'll be some fire in that game.
And so as we get confirmation on that, we will pass it along to you as well. So as we mentioned before, please like the video. Comment down below how you see this roster, this squad working out next year. And you are going to want to make sure you've got those notifications turned on, as we've got some guests coming up on the show that you're not going to want to miss.